I'm going to bring in my next guest. Really important story here. Good morning to you. How are you, Jasveer?
Good morning, Sonia. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, everybody. This is Jasveer Singh. He's from the Sikh Press Association. Now, Jasveer, I've talked before about the situation to a degree that you and I are about to discuss, and that is the situations that Sikhs worldwide are not only facing oppression, but very serious political targeting. And probably one of the most famous Sikhs who has been subject to this is Jagtar Singh Johal, whose story I've covered several times, including with his relatives. You are here to talk about something very similar. But before we proceed, could you tell my viewers who may not be familiar with the story of Jagtar Singh Johal, could you give us a brief overview?
Of course I could.
Thank you.
In 2017, a young man just like myself in his early 30s, born and raised in Scotland, Punjabi Sikh, just like myself as well, born to immigrant parents who'd moved to Scotland. He went out to Punjab in India to get married. He got married, had a fantastic occasion there with friends and family celebrating. And just a couple of days after his wedding, he's out shopping with his wife, as per standard, as you can imagine. And suddenly, a gang of ununiformed police officers, so-called police officers, perhaps they weren't even police officers, they put a bag over his head and bundled him into a van, and they drove him off. And he was, as far as his family was aware, disappeared for at least a couple of days until they suddenly got a phone call saying that he was actually with the police. He'd been with the police that whole time. They thought he'd been kidnapped. They were waiting for ransoms to come forward. The police said that they had arrested him based on alleged terror charges because he was a so-called Sikh terrorist. Now, within the Sikh community, Jagtar Singh Johal, just to summarize and finish this story, he was known as a respected blogger who was blogging about the Sikh genocide, which was carried out by the Indian state in the 80s through the 90s, and some say it continues to this day. And he was also documenting intricate detail about those who were targeted during that genocide as well. So he was known for that kind of work. He went out to India to get married. He ends up being what we believe is kidnapped and with terror charges left dangling over his head 7 years later without a charge, without a conviction.
And what has the UK government done to assist this?
So, in the words of his brother, just paraphrasing, who is a lawyer himself and somebody who's taken, a great deal of responsibility for the situation, not much, not enough. He is being overlooked for trade deals. This is something that even his local MP, his previous local MP, Martin Doherty-Hughes, said he's being sacrificed at the altar of trade when it comes to Britain and India's relations instead of a focus on human rights. And again, this is a person who's born and raised in Scotland. He has a British passport, just like probably most of your viewers and yourself and myself too. So yeah, this is a very concerning situation for all Sikhs.
Absolutely, he's as British as me, but the thing is that for those of us outside, we didn't realize this is necessarily a regular thing, but this has been going on for a long time. The targeting of Sikhs it's a worldwide scandal, actually, that very little is being done about it, right?
It is a massive international scandal, and actually last year was a groundbreaking year for the Sikh community because we saw the exposure of what has been termed now transnational repression by the Indian government, specifically targeting the Sikh community. Currently in Canada and in America, the USA, there are Indian state, I guess you would call them terrorists, assassins, if you will, are arrested, they're imprisoned, and they're facing trials which are currently in process and ongoing for attempting to kill, or in fact in Canada, actually kill Sikh activists and Sikh leaders. And this is because Sikh activists, despite the Sikh community being 1 or 2% of the community of India, we are a very influential, very powerful community that has pushed movements like the famous farmers' protest movement in 2020 to 2021, that has pushed back against what we would classify as fascism from the Indian government. And that continues in the diaspora, in the UK, of course, in Australia, Germany, wherever we are, that continues. And that places a thorn in the side of relations between India and said country, which in this case is the UK. And just one last thing about this, there's been many other political prisoners. There's been dozens of political prisoners just in the last 20 or so years, people who have spent 10, 20, 30 years in prison based on spurious charges. Sometimes they're not even convicted of a crime, but like Jagtar, who spent 7 years without being convicted of a crime in India, in a prison, this is what they do to us.
Got you. So, but you're actually also here to comment on a recent conviction of somebody I've talked to over a period of time, and that is Sikh Youth UK. Tell us what's going on there. Why all the media coverage in UK and India?
So it was a big story. I'm sure a lot of your viewers saw a story about a charity, so-called charitable organization called Sikh Youth UK. They were never a registered charity, but two of their members, one of whom who was on your show, Kuldeep Singh, aka Deepa Singh, a very well-known community activist globally around the world for the Sikh community, not just in the UK, very well-known figure. He has faced a guilty conviction of breaches of the Charities Commission's rules when an organization he was running was not even a charity. And that's a confusing situation.
Well, that doesn't even make sense. Journalistically, that does not make sense. So he has been convicted of something where, according that he's fallen foul of the Charity Commission, but even though it's not a charity, because it's actually the community coming together and donating, isn't it? That's what you've been dealing with.
Literally. And this kind of thing, let's remember, happens all the time. If you go to local sports clubs, if you go to maybe like churches, garage sales, there'll be fundraisers happening for all types of things by people who aren't registered to be running charities. But on this occasion, and it's only happened a very few times, I encourage people to actually look into how many different organizations are interrogated this way by the charity based on Charities Commission rules without even being a charity. It's very interesting what you'll find, because they all fit a certain type. And that type is what Sikh Youth UK were doing. They were community organizers, as well as being groups that organize, like, you know, football tournaments and just things of a very kind of basic nature to help the community, helping people coming off drugs and so forth. They've got videos by former users that's praising them for the support they gave. But as well as that, they were organizing the community, that when we were protesting about things like the transnational repression that I just talked about the situation specifically about Jagtar Singh Johal, that's when Sikh Youth UK started to get on the radar of authorities, because they're organizing the Sikh community to be louder, to be more, if you will, confrontational about situations we are facing, such as the situation of Jagtar Singh Johal, and specifically to that. And the last thing I'll say about that link is Jagtar Singh Johal's name was even included on court documents.
I was going to ask you about this. Why?
Why is very simple, because Jagtar Singh Johal was the political prisoner who India had detained now for 7 years without being convicted of a crime. He was also on the radar of UK authorities, it seems clear, to press him with similar charges as to what Deepa Singh, the Sikh Youth UK team, have faced. And again, from our perspective, it's a case of, well, the only pattern that fits around these people is that they are activists. They're the ones that are calling out the relations between the UK and India for trade, when the India is a massive human rights breacher. It is treating people with just, the only way you can describe it is fascism, silencing journalists, people being killed, using rape as a weapon of tool for a weapon against people, all different types of things that the Indian state is guilty of, all different types of things that the Sikh community is vocal about challenging, and even to the extent where there's the Khalistan movement, which calls for our own freedom, having a free homeland within India. Just remember, India is a nation of 1 billion people. It's a massive country. Winston Churchill famously said, India is as much a country as the equator, because it is such a different range of people. But nevertheless, it's been left in this state where it's under one rule. We would say largely upper caste Hindu rule, because it's based on the hierarchy of the caste system within India. That's how the country is run. And groups that don't fit into that hierarchy, like the Sikhs, we're constantly challenging the hierarchy, and therefore we are a problem to the Indian system.
So that is curious, isn't it, in itself? So how long did this investigation go on for? Because it seems to have just gone on forever.
I'm glad you asked, because there's so much I could say about this. Now, the important thing for people to remember is a very basic timeline. 2017 November, Jagtar Singh Johal becomes a political prisoner in India. That's after his wedding. He gets taken away, arrested, if you will, and he ends up in an Indian prison. For the rest of that year, Sikh Youth UK are extremely vocal about his situation. There's protests outside Downing Street, at least 2 or 3, all around the country. There's material being promoted, which explains the situation, explains how trade deals, again, the UK is prioritizing instead of Sikh lives. Now, a year later, these raids happen on 5 Sikh activists in 2018, September. Indian media has intricate information about these raids within hours of them happening. Not UK media. These raids have happened in the UK, but Indian media are naming people who are raided. They're putting their addresses out there. They're giving information about what the raids are linked with. And they're quoting authorities in India itself saying those raids were conducted because of diplomatic pressure. This is the exact term used in Indian media. The articles are still out there. They're saying the raids were conducted because of diplomatic pressure. So this has been going on since 2018. It only went to trial, last month. And so it's been dangling over the head for 6 odd years.
Bad. So this diplomatic pressure, this is political interference you're talking about, isn't it?
Undoubtedly, there's no other way to put it. This foreign interference extending from the Indian lobby, the Hindutva, Hindu extremist regime, is being investigated, as I said, in Canada very closely. In Australia, they have admitted to having this is the own words of Australian authorities, a nest of Indian spies that are immersed in the country, doing things like targeting the Sikh community. In Germany, there have been 3 different arrests of Indian state spies, specifically targeting the community, since 2016. So what do we think is going on in the UK? In the UK, we're turning a blind eye to it. While Joe Biden even spoke on it, Justin Trudeau spoke on it, Rishi Sunak stayed very silent, and Keir Starmer seems to be no different right now. But again, as you said, Sonia, this is very clear interference in the sovereign affairs of the UK.
Let me read you some comments. Sean Whitfield said, "My God, our government is disgusting. I feel so sorry for this man. Why does our government always disgrace us? I've worked with Sikhs. I've always found them very honest and honourable. So sad." I mean, I must say I'm not religious in any way at all, and I try not to be biased in any way either. But I have to say, I've always found any of the Sikhs that I've had any involvement with a very kind of, it's about peace, actually, like true peace, a spiritual kind of peace. And that has been my experience. And my experience has been overwhelmingly positive. So why the targeting?
So as I said earlier, there's a very deep philosophical reason as to a very innate conflict between the Sikh philosophy of life and the way the Indian society is structured. It's based on, a lot of people are aware, like a caste system, where if you're born in a certain position, you can't change from it. And the Sikh philosophy teaches that's just nonsense, and we don't believe in it. We believe in fact, destroying it. We believe in overcoming these hurdles, and anyone, doesn't matter what background or what kind of status you're born into, you can be elevated to the status of a king. And this is something that we don't just like preach in some sort of like mystical way. No, we actually challenge tyranny and oppression. That's part of our faith. A faith practice is to challenge tyranny. So this is the kind of thing that we're constantly standing up to the Indian state and being a thorn in their side as they're conducting, as I said, fascism across the country. And the same goes for authorities in the UK and India. And now specifically within that, there is the Free Homeland movement of Khalistan. Khalistan, again, is a threat to the stability of India, because the Punjab is known as the breadbasket of India, but it is also the motherland of the Sikh faith and where most of the Sikh community lives. And within that, there's a lot of support for Khalistan. Now, they will completely deny this, but within the diaspora, there's been a mock referendum going on, and hundreds of thousands of people in all diaspora hotspots in the USA, UK, Australia, they're coming out and they're showing support for this referendum for a free Sikh homeland. So these are the types of things that are going on that are making the Indian government think, we don't want these people riling up our voters, riling up our community and exposing our human rights abuses. We want to silence them. And in India, the final thing I'll say about the way they run their country, in a country of 1 billion people, it does not matter to kill 10,000 at a time. this is the way the Indian government has always conducted its business since it was founded in 1947. Again, in a country of 1 billion people, what is it for them to kill a few thousand here and there every now and again? And that's what they've been doing to the Sikh community. And that's why we have been very vocal about this issue, and we challenge them everywhere we can.
And so you should. And while it's not necessarily something that we hear about regularly, because we simply don't, if our government is involved, our police, our judiciary, then it is our business and we need to do something about it. When is the sentencing of Sikh Youth UK? Is that this month?
I believe it's the first week of November. I think the date changed recently, so I would just double check that the sentencing is coming up. And again, I want to just emphasize exactly what you said. The UK government is very readily involved. Even from way back in 1984, you can read documents from declassified.com, .co.uk, which explain the UK's role in the very beginning of the Sikh genocide in 1984, which is the 40 years anniversary of this year, which we are marking across the world. And West Midlands police were found to be leaking that information about the raids because it could only have come from them. So in 2018, when Indian media are reporting about raids in the UK, giving out addresses of British-born citizens and calling them so-called Sikh terrorists, none of them charged with any crime, by the way, but their names are broadcasted all over Indian media calling them terrorists. That information could only have come from UK authorities.
Well, the concerning thing, of course, is they're going to be far more punishing on this sentencing than they are with people like whatever, Hugh Edwards, or, you know, actual people who are abusers. So it's quite shocking. So we're very keen to keep an eye on this because I hate any form of injustice. And I realise there are injustices taking place here. Is there anything else you'd like us to know before you leave us this morning?
If people go out and read about this situation, they will be reading largely from places that miss out all of the context that I've been talking about. That the raids that happened in 2018, they were conducted because of diplomatic pressure, according to India, which targeted with the individual who ended up being convicted guilty this last month. So I would ask people to actually do a bit more research on this and understand that this is a deeper issue of transnational repression, of governments collaborating in their fascism, if you will, to silence influential voices who are organizing at a grassroots level.
Got you. Absolutely got you. Good Ship Lollipop said, I've always pronounced it Sikh, not sick. Me too.
It's
and
okay.
Learn something new today, says Good Ship Lollipop. Indeed. Well, let seek and you will find, said Randy. Whichever way it is, as long as it's positive and supportive and prepared to untackle this long, long injustice, then I support it. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Jazvia. We truly appreciate it. Take good care of yourself, and anything we can do, you just let me know, okay?
Thank you so much, Sonia. Thank you for your time. Take care.
Take care. Thank you. Bye.